His number came up on my phone at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. I know the exact time because I was sitting across the conference table from David Mercer when it happened. And David Mercer was, for 16 years, the crown jewel of my old firm's client portfolio. He was also, as of 6 weeks prior, mine. I let it ring. I watched it ring. And then I turned my phone face down on the table, and I finished the meeting. My name is not important. What I built is. I joined Harland Construction Management 16 years ago as the only woman on a project management team of 11. I want to be precise about that, not because I need you to feel sorry for me, but because it is the context for everything that follows. I was the only woman in every meeting, on every site visit, at every client dinner for the better part of a decade. I learned to be quieter than I was, sharper than I needed to be, and twice as prepared as anyone else in the room. Not because anyone told me to, because I understood the math. Over 16 years, I built a reputation that had nothing to do with Harland's name and everything to do with mine. Clients didn't call the firm, they called me. When a project was in trouble, when a timeline had collapsed or a budget had gone sideways, they called my cell. At 7 in the morning, on Saturdays. I always picked up. I told myself that was dedication. Looking back, I think it was something closer to proof, constant, exhausting proof that I deserved to be in the room. My boss was a man named Richard Hale. I had worked directly under Richard for 9 of my 16 years at Harland, and I want to be honest about something. I respected him, genuinely. He was smart and fair, and in the early years, he had advocated for me in rooms I wasn't in, pushed my name forward for projects I wouldn't have been considered for otherwise. I thought of him as something close to a mentor. I thought he saw me clearly. The director position opened in the spring, Senior Director of Project Operations, the role I had been building toward for the better part of a decade. I had the tenure, I had the client relationships, I had the results. I also had, at Richard's specific request, spent the previous 8 months bringing a newer team member named Carter up to speed on the accounts I managed. Getting him client-ready, Richard had said, giving him exposure. I understand now what that actually was. Richard called me into his office on a Thursday morning and told me they had decided to go in a different direction for the director role. That Carter would be stepping into the position. That I was, and I remember this phrase exactly, not quite ready for that level of visibility. Not quite ready. After 16 years, after building every major client relationship that firm had, I looked at Richard for a long moment, and then I said, very calmly, very clearly, I understand. I went back to my desk, I drafted my resignation letter, and I submitted it before lunch. I want to be clear about what I did and didn't do on my way out. I did not take a single file that belonged to Harland. I did not download a contact list. I did not send myself documents or proposals or anything that could be characterized as proprietary. I packed my personal items, completed my handover notes more thoroughly than anyone had asked me to, and I walked out of that building on a Friday afternoon with my head completely level. What I did do, starting the following Monday, was make phone calls, personal calls, to people I had worked with for years, some of them for over a decade. I told them I had made a decision to move on, and that I wanted them to hear it from me directly. I told them where I was going. I did not ask them to follow me. I didn't need to. Over the next 3 weeks, 7 of Harlan's 9 major accounts called the firm to notify them they would be moving their business. Not because I had recruited them, because I had spent 16 years being the person they actually trusted. And when that person was gone, the relationship was gone with her. David Mercer was the first call I received. He didn't ask if I was leaving. He asked where I was going and whether there was room for him at the new firm. I told him there was always room for him. I want to tell you I felt triumphant in those 3 weeks. I didn't. What I felt was tired. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a weight for so long that even putting it down feels like effort. I had spent 16 years making Harlan look good, making Richard look good, making every man in every meeting look like the most prepared person in the room. And the moment I stopped, the whole thing started to show exactly what it had always been. Carter took over the $23 million Meridian project, the largest active contract Harlan had, the one I had originated, the one I had shepherded through 2 years of development before I left. He had been in commercial construction for 4 years. He had never run a project above $8 million. Richard had given him the keys to a machine he didn't know how to drive. I heard things through the industry the way you hear things, through people who called to check in, through former colleagues who were still there and couldn't quite hide their discomfort when the project came up. The timeline slipped by 6 weeks in the first month. Then the primary subcontractor walked after a payment dispute that should never have escalated the way it did. Then the client, a hospitality group I had personally brought to Harlan 3 years earlier, started asking questions that weren't being answered to their satisfaction. By month 3, the Meridian project was in crisis. And Richard Hale called my cell at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting across from David Mercer. I let it ring. I turned my phone face down, and I finished the meeting. I listened to the voicemail that evening. Richard's voice was careful and measured, in the way that people are careful and measured when they are trying very hard not to sound desperate, and are not entirely succeeding. He said he hoped I was well. He said he had heard I had landed somewhere good, and he was glad for me. And then he said that Harlan was navigating some challenges on the Meridian project, and that he wondered if I might have any interest in a consulting conversation. A consulting conversation, after not quite ready for that level of visibility. I did not call him back. Not that evening, not the next day, not ever. I want to explain that decision because I think it matters. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even satisfaction. Not exactly. It was something simpler than that. I had spent 16 years returning every call, solving every problem, being available at 7 in the morning and on Saturdays, and whenever the situation required it. And I had done that for a firm that looked at everything I had built and decided I wasn't visible enough to lead it. I was done being available for people who had decided I wasn't enough. That was all. That was the whole decision. The Meridian project was terminated by the client 4 months after I left. The hospitality group walked, cited mismanagement and breach of timeline commitments, and took their future development pipeline, 3 additional projects worth a combined $40 million, to a competitor. Not my firm, a different one. The industry is not large, and these things travel. The detail that I will carry with me longest happened about 2 months after the termination. David Mercer and I were in a review meeting when he mentioned, completely unprompted, that someone from Harlan had reached out to ask if he'd consider returning his account to them. He said it the way you'd mention something mildly amusing that had happened over the weekend. He said, "I told them I go where you go. I hope that's all right. I told him it was more than all right. Richard Hale retired 18 months after I left. I don't know whether that was planned or whether the Meridian fallout accelerated it. I didn't ask. I made a decision not to track the consequences, the same way I'd made that decision before. Not because I didn't care, but because my energy belonged to what I was building, not to what I had left behind. What I know is this. I spent 16 years being the most prepared person in every room I was allowed into. I was passed over for a title because someone decided I wasn't visible enough. And then I became impossible to ignore. Carter got the director title. I got the clients. I got the career. I got the corner office with the floor-to-ceiling windows, where I sat on a Tuesday afternoon and watched Richard Hale's number light up my phone. Not quite ready for that level of visibility. I think about that phrase sometimes. Turns out, I was the only one who could see clearly all along.